Nice. Okay, are we ready? Can you still see me?
Yeah, you look great.
All right, yeehaw, let's go. So, I am Scott Morris, aka the Token Jedi, and today we're going to be talking about emergency finance. This is a subject that I am personally very passionate about because just a little bit of background. I grew up in Alabama and I went to the University of Alabama and graduated in December of 2008 with a degree in interdisciplinary studies and political economics into, what was arguably the worst job market in modern history. And I realized at that time that I was probably one of the only people in my generation who had gone into a field of study that would equip me with, some way of grappling with what the hell was going on. Of course, I had no idea how to do that then. Whether or not I know how to do that now is up for some debate. But in any case, I really wanted to understand what was at the root of the great financial crisis and, what was going on with, the global financial system writ large. And, most specifically, like, why does life feel so shitty for so many of us? Like, why is life so hard? When, if we were like a little creative, things could be so much better for so many people. So, what is that all about? And in the wake of the great financial crisis, my family's business closed down. We were one of the first businesses to close because we were in marketing and advertising and printing. And that's one of those line items that just gets slashed immediately in a depression. And that also led to us losing a lakeside property that was our home. And so that had a very profound impact on me. And I really held on to the feeling of, 2008 and, just the kind of free fall, right? It was like your stomach was like kind of like you were going over a roller coaster. Nobody really knew what to expect from day to day. Businesses were closing down, people were losing their homes, etc. And then at the end of it all, right, it was massive amounts of fraud, and those guys get to pay each other massive bonuses while the working class gets stuck footing the bill. So that informed my whole outlook and is a major reason why I developed this passion for community scale currency programs. Basically, my framework became like, what are the things that we can do, right? We meaning the Main Street people, regular working class people, living our lives, trying to make life work, putting food on the table, raising kids, right? How can we protect ourselves from future crises, right? Because even if we could figure out what happened with the government or the Fed or Wall Street, right, our likelihood of being able to go and impact those in a significant way before the next crisis was basically nil and none, right? And so I wanted to learn how to play defense against black swans of the future. So that's how we got to emergency finance and how I got into this space. Right. So what is the emergency, right? In modern times, we're referring to it more and more as the poly crisis, right? And if there is another crisis that shows up, we're just like, hey, fuck it, throw it on the crisis pile, right? And it's like we're living through that, this is fine meme, except it is totally not fine. And we have an obligation to intervene to make it better, right? There's that riff on that meme that people circulate sometimes as well, right? But it's not like we can just sit here and just continue to take this stuff because we're headed for disaster, right? And we realized, especially in like the wake of COVID-19, that the government is not going to show up as fast as we need them to, and they're not going to do as much as we need them to. We kind of get to that more in another slide here. But there's many more crises that we remain susceptible to, right? Not only the unforeseeable global pandemic events, right? I mean, not unforeseeable, but you know what I mean here. It's like we can't predict when that sort of thing is going to occur. We also got to be increasingly on alert for natural disasters, right? As the oceans are warming and the planet is warming. The fires are worse. You guys know a lot about that there in Portland. And hurricanes are getting larger, just as some examples, right, of how nature is talking to us about the situation and how we really need to listen up and adjust our trajectory and our economy to stop burning stuff so damn always, right? But there's also, you know, social and political unrest, right? The protests in the wake of George Floyd's killing, for example, we saw this massive wave of people calling for defunding the police because, you know, you look at basically any municipal budget in the U.S. And in many other countries around the world, but I'm from the U.S. and so that's where I tend to speak from and am kind of most informed by, right? You look at these municipal budgets and it's like half or more is going to police departments, right? And the other half gets split up between all of our needs, meeting our basic needs, right? Paying for schools, paying for roads, right? Other basic services. And people are realizing like that is just a recipe for suffering, right? All you're investing in there is punishing people, right? Typically for the way that they're responding out of a want for the investment in the other stuff. Okay, so it's gross mismanagement and it's absolutely negligence. But for some reason, we're just stuck in this feedback loop where, you know, our elected officials just want to shovel more money to the cops, right? And we can kind of see that kind of most glaringly now in these plans for cop cities. We got 69 cop cities that are planned across the country. And it's like, oh, so that's your plan for how to deal with homelessness and climate change and social unrest, right? This is just absolutely bonkers. And then kind of even more recently, right, we have the conflict. I mean, conflict is being very generous. Let's call it what it is. The Israeli genocide on the Palestinians in Gaza, right, and increasingly in the West Bank, right, we're increasingly susceptible to the blowback from those positions of our government, as well as increasing unrest on the basis of, you know, people saying like, "Hey, we don't want to be funding a genocide. What the hell's going on here? Stop doing that!" Right? So again, polycrisis. It seems like we don't do small problems anymore. It's just go big or go home, right? So, in light of that situation, and in light of the fact that we have a modern lived experience of how little the government seems to give a shit about our general well-being, the general welfare, we can see the need for more localized systems that are resilient and even anti-fragile, right? Where crises turn into opportunities for growth and to strengthen the community at the end, not just to recover where we were before, but to become even stronger as a result. And these kinds of financial systems are, you know, much smaller in scale and much better able to respond to our needs with a shorter response time, right? So that's what this is all about. But hopping back into this frame of the crisis conditions, right? So what is it that happens in these moments of like acute crisis, right? Thinking back to 2008 is easy, right? For people who are old enough, at least, but also COVID, right? Which was just a few years ago now. I mean, and that's not to say that COVID is gone. If you're looking at the figures from wastewater samplings, you know that infection rates are still quite high. Please mask up while you're traveling and out there. This is an ongoing pandemic. We are not post-pandemic. That is a delusion. So please be careful out there, folks. But what is it economically speaking that happens, right? Well, first thing, everything slows down, right? And especially during the experience of lockdowns and COVID, right? Everything came to basically a standstill, right? And then, oops, right? The evergreen shipping, shipping vessel got stuck in the Suez Canal and cut off this major trade route for like, what was it, like 2 to 3 months or something. And, that impacted all kinds of supply chains all around the world. And, there was inflation. So people start panicking, they start hoarding, right? And money basically comes to a standstill, right? And it feels like it's, as we would say down south, moving like frozen molasses. Okay. So that really has a strong impact on the business community because they need regular cash flow to pay their rents, pay their overhead, and they need to have working capital. And that becomes very hard to access. You've got the supply chain issues, as we just spoke to, and shocker, when the government completely fails to respond in an adequate fashion, right? We start to lose trust in those institutions. So we want other institutions and other kinds of networks that are higher trust, because this is the moment of need. This is what those things are supposed to be there for, and they're gone. They're not there, right? So obviously, that's we also have the increased community needs, right? People, for the most part, just trying to live their lives, right? Trying to keep enough food on the table. Again, raise their kids, keep the poverty at bay, basically, just keep surviving. And so all of this slowdown ends up impacting our own personal wallets. It puts people into very desperate positions, and desperate people do desperate things. And that's really what we want to avoid, because once you get into that situation, that's when the social fabric, starts to really break down, and, you start having violence, and that's a big problem. So my whole approach to systems design, political economic systems design, is about taking those crisis conditions and just accepting that they will exist, whether I want them to or not. That's the scenario we have to design for, because that's where the major gap is, right? So what do we want these systems to be able to do in those moments, right? Accepting that those are just the conditions. What are these needs that are going unmet? And then translating that into what we call design requirements, right? So that we can have a principled approach to designing these systems such that they're better able to meet our needs in these great periods of crisis. So what does that look like, right? Basically just the inverse of what we were just speaking to, increasing the access to liquidity and capital, right? That means having the ability to create credit, to print currency when we need to, right? For the period of time we need to. It doesn't mean that we have to overthrow, right, the monetary and financial order, although that does sound kind of nice now that you mention it. But what we really need to do is just fill those gaps. Okay, and we're going to be speaking a lot about that and what that has looked like historically, as well as kind of what we can aspire to in the future. We want to have these networks be fortifying the local supply chains and our trade networks, creating marketplaces where local businesses and local suppliers can find one another and do business with one another more easily, especially when it comes to filling the gaps in our supply chains, accepting that every now and then you have a shipping vessel that gets stuck in the Suez Canal and suddenly you don't have access to resource X, with the same regularity at the same prices that you're used to. So what are the local sources that are available, right? This actually provides us a major opportunity to recircularize the local economy, right? Which also, by the way, keeps money in the local economy and creates more employment and more wages. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits that we can realize even before there is a crisis. That's kind of one of the major takeaways that I hope that people get here. But we'll wait on that. So obviously, we want these systems to create more trust in the community. We want to weave a tighter and richer social fabric so that communities can get to know each other better and start to build trust and relational capital on the basis of helping one another out, right? And we saw this again in the wake of COVID, where you had this massive emergence of mutual aid networks all across the country and all around the world, of communities just saying like, well, what the hell else are we going to do? Let's figure out how we can help one another just get by, right? So that's a very key theme, right? And then finally, right, same sort of deal with the mutual aid. Let's just meet needs, right? Let's keep people housed. Let's keep people safe. Let's keep people fed, right? Let's make sure that kids can go to school, continue their education, right? In spite of acute, challenging circumstances, right? And make sure that people have access to the various services that they need. So this is not rocket surgery, right? You take the crisis conditions and you get design requirements, right? And basically you can see you've translated this into sort of plain speak, if you will, right? Just accepting that the normal banking and financial infrastructure is not going to be working right. So you're going to need a different sort of structure to fill in that gap, right? External inputs, who knows? Let's work with what we have, right? Government is not coming in or fast enough or doing enough. So we need to have our own structures that help us allocate resources, right, in more participatory ways so that we have access to the information and the resources we need to get those resources where they got to go. All right. And again, focusing on basic needs, making sure that people don't go hungry, because if that guy is unsafe, I'm unsafe, right? If they're unsafe, we're unsafe. So let's keep everybody safe, right? And we can utilize these new systems to incentivize, the things in the economy that have gone for far too long, very neglected, like care work and doing good stuff in the community. Okay. It's not too crazy. All right. So all this stuff here on the right, I like to call the why, right? And let's talk about why I call that the why. What we're seeing here is a map of sorts of, what it looks like to design a financial or a monetary system. There is a recommended resource that I will share at the end of the presentation called People Powered Money. That is where this graphic is sourced. And I will also speak a little bit to how this illustration is inaccurate. See if you can figure it out before I get there. All right, but we start with why, okay? You want to start with what is it that we are trying to accomplish with the system? What are the aims and the objectives, the ultimate goals that we're trying to have an impact on? Next, that's going to provide us with the who, right? Who are the stakeholders in this community, in this place that we are looking out for, right? That's going to be the regular people. That's going to be local businesses. It's going to be civic organizations. It's going to be networks. It's going to be the local government. It's going to be the local financial institutions, right? They may not be able to provide us the services that we're used to or be operating normally, but they're still going to be helpful partners to have around the table for those things that they can help with. All right. Just because the system has, gone into crisis doesn't mean these people are our enemy. They still want the same things that we want, which is, stability, and a healthy economy in our community, right? There are other parties like tax authorities and academics and press organizations, right, who may not be directly involved but may have some kind of an interest, as well as external parties like technology providers and experts, subject matter experts that you might bring in to help figure out this, that, or the other thing. So you want to get in touch with that whole stakeholder map, right? Just who's there. Okay. And so typically what you're trying to do is bring those parties together in a co-design process, right? Where we're going to talk about the what, right? The what is like the thing of the system itself, right? Systems are things that exist in between us, right? They are, agreements, they're structures, they're mechanisms, right? They're, the currency unit, the note, the app, that kind of stuff. Okay. When it comes to a financial system or a monetary system, you're going to be concerned a lot with this life cycle, which I'll speak to in the next slide. And that really focuses on like, what are the assets that we're tapping into in this community and how are we activating them together? Then how are we issuing, this new credit or this new currency, right, into circulation so that people can get it? That is an extremely powerful moment in the course of every system. The way that it comes into existence in this issuance moment, it's extremely political and extremely powerful, which is why you want to make sure that you have very solid governance in place, right? And then the circulation of those units, right? Whether it's a loan that is there for a specific period and you got to pay it back, or it's a currency that's out there and it circulates, and like what's going on in terms of who can use it for what, when. There's a lot of design space that can be explored there. And then finally, the redemption, right? How do you retire these things at the end of their life cycle, so that they really deliver on the full promise? Typically they're redeemed for underlying assets, or they relieve somebody of some duty, like a tax obligation or something like this. So then finally, right, once you got the what figured out, at least to a certain level of understanding, right, then you can talk about the how. Okay, based on this what, if we have this app that does this thing where people, come together and they're writing gift certificates to their own businesses and they're putting it in the kitty, and then they can draw against that like a line of credit kind of thing. Then we're going to need an organization that is working with these guys and showing them how to do this, and is working with those guys and is showing them how to do this, right? That's the kind of practical aspects that we call the how, right? So what I was alluding to earlier there is that the ribbon is actually spiraling in the wrong direction. And this is just kind of my curse because I'm both the system designer and a graphics guy. And clearly the person who put this together has not facilitated the design process. I forgive them. It's okay, but it's going the wrong direction. All right. You're not starting in the how and then the what, the who, the why, and going up like that. No, you start at why, who, what, how, and you're working your way up the other direction. So anyway, fun little tidbit. Quick shout outs to our good friends at Commons Engine and the Coventina Foundation and the MetaCurrency Project for the lovely graphic here. It's just kind of a whole family of interrelated folks on the system life cycle here. So you can see that it begins in our minds, right? Which is, the greatest hack of all of this is that if we can imagine it and we can agree on it, then anything can happen, right? Like that's amazing. It means that anything is possible as long as we agree it's fair. Okay. But it starts in our heads, moves on to the drawing board. Then we're going to build it. We're going to pilot it. We're going to figure out what's going on and on with it, evaluate it, and then improve, right? Or it didn't work get rid of it, right? Very simple sort of life cycle flow there, but you'd be surprised how easy it is to get lost in all of the details. There is a lot of complexity that goes into this stuff. So it's really handy to have this bird's eye view of like, where are we in this whole flow and what are our options? So love that graphic. So here, what we're looking at, I'm just going to let this run for a little bit. This is from the Grassroots Economic Foundation's Village Market Simulator on YouTube. I highly recommend people go to YouTube and check out that series. It is definitely a little geeky, okay, fair warning. But what you're looking at here is a simulation of a local village and a marketplace. And on the top, as you can see, this is only using normal, like, fiat currency issued by a central bank, right? Whether that's dollars or, shekels or pounds, right? It doesn't really matter. But you're looking at a year's worth of trading activity. And I'm just going to click it back, let it run one more time. You're looking at a year's worth of trading activity, and you can see the heat map, right? And as these nodes start to go red, they've defaulted on loans that have been issued to them. And so you can see the one that has the additional cooperative credit clearing available is doing much, much better in terms of performance, even as the economy hits a downturn, towards the January, February period where we are right now, right? So on the top, everybody's defaulting. There's very little trade, while the village that has, kind of a mutual credit clearing function is able to survive and thrive in the face of that economic slowdown, right? So just a very quick, easy visual example of the kind of effect that these systems can have in a local economy, right? So example emergency financial systems include, all right, and I want to be really clear about two things. This list is not exhaustive. I'm not going to talk about all of them today because that would take too long, and I didn't have that much time. And three, nope, never mind, just two. All right, so time banks. Oh, and three is that these terms are not mutually exclusive. That was the third point. These things are not, so there are time banks, like time banks are a form of mutual credit in some cases, okay? Not in every case, but in some cases, mutual credit is what underlies the way that the time bank works. In other cases, like a time credit system, right? I know the names are confusing. I'm sorry. It's not, I don't make up the rules. I don't make up all the names. I make up some of the names, but not all the names, right? But some of them issue positive credits, right? I go and I volunteer and then I get a time credit, okay? But nobody needs to go into debt for that time credit to come into existence, right? In a mutual credit arrangement, there's always an offset, right? Somebody goes up one, somebody goes down one. That's the nature of mutual credit. It's always one up, one down, so that if you add all the ups and all the downs, you get a big goose egg. They also refer to it as zero balance systems in the trade and barter industry. But yeah, that's a qualifier there. One that I am going to spend some time on today is emergency script, right? And that has not a little to do with me traveling around with this book, which you can find on Amazon. It's admittedly a little expensive. I just checked today and it's available for a couple $100. But it's worth it. It's worth it, okay? Because you might need to know. You might need to know, all right? But we'll talk about emergency script a lot. All right, commitment pooling. This is also by way of the Grassroots Economics Foundation. They've recently published a white paper on the commitment pooling protocol. This is based on indigenous practices in Kenya and elsewhere in Africa. There are innumerable instances of these traditional practices that bring communities together, where people just bring the value that they have or that they can produce, they pool that together, and then they leverage that to help people get major things done, right? Like the proverbial barn raising kind of situation. All right. So uh, it's worth reading up on. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it today. The other one is municipal microbonds. We have a fairly modern instance of this. I will cover it briefly, so I don't want to talk about it right now. Complementary currencies. This is what you're seeing kind of depicted on the right side of the screen. But see also my earlier caveat that these things are not mutually exclusive. You could consider time banks and mutual credit and emergency script to be complementary currencies, right? Also, rotating labor associations. This is a very classic sort of arrangement where, this month we're going to go raise Dan's barn, and the next month we're going to go raise Jedediah's barn. And it's like the whole community, or at least the participants come together to all work together for a collective end, right? That may happen to benefit one family, but we all take turns being the beneficiary, and it all nets out, right? And we're all better for it, right? That's kind of the general nature of that. You could also apply rotating labor association to something like childcare, right? The next one is multilateral obligation clearing. I would say this one is probably on the more sophisticated end, and that like it takes a little bit of explaining and thinking to get your head around it, right? But the very simple idea here is that we have a network of businesses, and we all have invoices to one another. Like, I'm buying your stuff and you send me an invoice, and I'm buying your stuff, and they're buying somebody else's stuff and they get an invoice too, right? Well, if you set up a clearinghouse, basically, where we all send those invoices, then the clearinghouse can say like, oh, okay, that guy owes this guy 10, he owes this guy 20, he owes this guy 30, right? Well, then we can reduce everybody by 10. You can take the lowest common denominator and you can just cut it out right off the bottom. And so then A no longer owes B anything. B owes C 10 and C owes A 20, right? It's better to have it visually depicted. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm not even going to speak to this that much. There is a place that I'll point you to for people who want to know more about this, especially those with an interest in blockchain. This is making a lot of progress, right? And the last one is rotating savings and credit associations. Basically, in a way, the same principle as a rotating labor association, but now instead of pooling our labor, whether that's denominated in time or days or whatever, okay, now it's with currency, right? So we're going to, every month, everybody puts $10 into the kitty, and one person gets those funds to go do some stuff with it, right? That's kind of the nature of the rotating savings and credit association, right? But what all of these things have in common is they are not dependent on external resources. They can all be activated exclusively on the basis of things that we have right here, right now. That's the key point. Okay, so first up is emergency script. All right, and I've already shown the book, but these are defined as temporary certificates issued for exchange at a later date for whatever is stated as the purpose of the issue, money, goods, or some other asset. Okay, kind of vague. A lot of, or maybe not vague, maybe overly technical in a way, kind of legalese, right? Try not to get caught up too much in that unless you're a super geek like me and you need to get into kind of the forensic or the engineering side of this stuff. Basically, you have a range of options for how to create local money supply, right, that can be used to just provide cash for people to use in buying and selling goods and services in an economic depression in this case, right? So this is something that has a long history, not only in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico, but all around the world, right? And that's what you're looking at in the bottom right there is one of the more famous examples of this is the Austrian Virgil, right? From the town of Virgil, where they took, the cash that they had in the town, they put it in the safe, they issued these notes, and you can see these little stamps there. We'll get to that in just a second. But it provided a circulation incentive, right, which meant that this money, this currency, this type of currency circulated many more times in a given period, let's say it's a year, right, than the same amount in, central bank issued money would circulate. So in the case of the Virgil, it's some estimates have it as the Virgil units were circulating at 12 to 14 times as much as the equivalent in Reichsmark to whatever it was that they were using at the time, right? Which is, by the way, fucking mind-blowing, okay? That means that this currency is 12 to 14 times more effective at helping people meet their needs and getting shit done than the normal money, right? So then it's small surprise that when the Austrian central bank heard about what was going on, they came and shut that shit down. They're like, we don't want these guys producing a superior monetary product to ours. That can't be allowed. So you can see how this stuff can get pretty powerful. All right. So this is also highly political work to do. And it really reasserts people power and local sovereignty. All right. So I just hope that people will sit with that a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to get the rest of these things out here and we'll just go through. Great. So there are a lot of options, right? That's one of the things that's really cool. I mean, look at this. There's like examples and examples and examples. And what you're seeing here in the bullets is just the typology that's on, pages 16 to 18, right? Of what were the major categories of these things that came into existence. And just to be clear with everybody, these things were only around for a few years. All right. So we're talking from like 1930 to 1933, right, was the peak. But again, I can't emphasize enough, right, that was in a vacuum of normal money moving, right? This was the stuff people were using to survive. And that's why they're so important. So just because they're not still around today doesn't mean that they are not critical infrastructure, right, during these critical periods. All right. So I just kind of want to reflect a little bit on some of these different options because some of them are kind of cool. So script guaranteed by the assigned dividends of closed banks. Okay, so some of there were bank failures all over the place, right? And they were basically put into some kind of bankruptcy or receivership type situation. And some of the script, right, gave you a claim on some of that some of that cash. All right, non-hoarding and prosperity checks. And you're gonna have to pardon me while I refer to the text because there is some nuance in this. I want to make sure I get things right. All right. These issues were designed as a specific response to President Hoover's February 1932 plea to keep money in circulation. Some of them were purposely made in mammoth size to call attention to their reasons for existence and in hopes of having them serve more speedily as a circulating medium. Also provides some examples of where these things were issued. Script issued by cities, counties, and boards of education. These are some of the ones that are most interesting to me. Tax anticipation notes. Right, these are clever as hell. Right, these were well backed by anticipated revenue of back taxes and were themselves accepted in payment of delinquent taxes. Probably over 100 communities issued this form of scrip. And according to a report in the May 1934 American Municipal Association, It was the most successful of the various forms of local script to have been issued. Some of it bore interest, some of it did not, blah, blah, blah. Here's places that issued it. Kind of similarly, right, you know that, I mean, if you live in a town or municipality, you're paying a certain portion of your taxes to the school system, right, to the Board of Education. So boards of education themselves would issue tax notes, right, to get them into circulation so that people had something to pay, right, for the school, right? Work vouchers, trade script, most of this issues are kind of not meant for hand-to-hand circulation. It served as payment to individuals for work done. Those individuals could redeem the script at certain stores, right? So this is basically capacity-backed script, right? Or think about it like gift certificates issued to the company store. There is a great case example that you can read about, I think, in Rethinking Money, which is in the recommended resources at the end, where Guinness, right, like the beer, right, Guinness started issuing their payroll checks in small denominations so that people could use them as circulating script during an Irish banking crisis. So that was basically beer-backed money. And just as a beer drinker myself, I can't help but appreciate that. So stamp script is what we're talking about with the Virgil, right? And basically, what a stamp script is a unit that basically automatically is canceled or is voided unless you add these stamps to it to kind of keep it alive, right? And so you're paying a little bit every month or every week, depending on the way that it's organized. Week would be a little bit of a headache, but in any case, this is also known as demurrage, right? Where it's like a use it or lose it function that's added onto the currency. And that's how you get these super high circulation rates, also known as velocity. The super high velocity of money is because if I don't use it, if I don't convert it into real goods or services, it's just going to expire, right? So I might as well use it to turn it into something that isn't going to expire, right? So that's how you get like running circles around normal central bank issued currency. All right. So there are a few others that were issued by unemployment organizations, chambers of commerce, civic organizations, special events, right? Which I just had a real world experience of when I was in Brussels not too long ago at ECC, where Commons Hub Brussels, the second Commons Hub in the world, modeled after the Commons Hub in Austria, which I'm about to go to host of the Crypto Commons gathering here in just a couple weeks. Where at Regen Village at Commons Hub Brussels, right, we had wristbands that have NFC chips in them, and we were able to volunteer in different ways at the event to earn regen points, regen tokens, which then we were able to redeem for swag. Okay, so rather than just going to the event and just consuming the content and just grabbing swag that's just there for free, it was much more participatory and created a kind of a much more fun dynamic where people were engaging in various activities to help make the event possible, even as they're enjoying it. So it transformed it from kind of a just a producer and consumer relationship to a prosumer participatory dynamic that is true to form to a commons, right? So payroll script, another great example, kind of just referred to that with the Guinness thing. But anyway, I just feel like this is a field of currency, right? A major design space that a lot more people in DAOs should be aware of, especially as, we get deeper and deeper into the poly crisis, and who knows what could happen, right? So what can you do? These are things that you can do, right? Oh yeah, clearinghouse associations, bank script, it's fine. Okay, next up, complementary currencies. you can see rather than providing a definition of complementary currencies specifically, I've opted to include Bernard's definition of money, right? An agreement within a community to use something as a medium of exchange, right? And the reason why I prefer to do that is because that that that's the rules, right? Those are the simple requirements, right? And there's three critical, practical, functional terms in that: agreement, community, and medium, right? Medium of exchange, right? So the agreement is us as humans deciding what's fair, right? Within the community, right? Put some kind of bounds on where this system is, who this system is intended to serve, okay? And then the medium, right? That's where we tend to kind of get quite hyper focused and distracted by the thing, the what, right? So there's a lot of talk about these what elements, but please try not to lose sight of, the why and the who that are the agreement in the community. Okay. So complementary currencies is a major blanket and umbrella term. All right. And it basically means any kind of currency that is not legal tender, right? Except legal tender, right? Especially for the local side of these things, I like to refer to it as local tender, right? It's something that can serve in place of more formal central bank issued currency, right? Typically when that more formal central bank issued currency ain't around, right? For whatever reason, right? These are currencies that operate on the edges of those systems, because just out of necessity, right? We don't have the normal money, so we had to reinvent money, come up with our own agreement of what's fair, so that we can allocate resources and meet our needs. Okay, so you find these in a wide variety of flavors, right? Some of them are time backed, right? Time based, right? Time banks, time credits, right? There are variations, like there's different schools of thought here. By the way, I'll just take a moment on the time based issue. Um, some people come at this from okay, everybody's labor is equal, right? And it's very egalitarian, and that can be a beautiful thing. There's other people that are like, well, walking dogs for an hour isn't exactly the same as providing somebody with legal advice for an hour, right? Like, takes a lot more education and specialization to be able to provide quality legal advice, right, than it does to walk somebody's dogs. Okay. So maybe the lawyer or the dentist, right, should be able to charge more time credits for their service than dog walkers, right? And I find that to be pretty practical. Okay. I'm a very pragmatic sort of person. And I recognize that, yeah, there are levels and, relative prices in a market as a way of the way that we communicate around relative value. And just because we've chosen to operate in the time space doesn't necessarily mean I'm skipping all the way to the egalitarian view that everybody's labor is equal. So it depends on which of these systems you're in. And if you are in the design process and finding yourself in dialogue with the community around this, there is still optionality. Okay, that's kind of the key point. Normally, people will list the Ithaca hours under time currencies. Just a quick caveat, because I happen to be the guy who moved to Ithaca to succeed the Ithaca hours, and I did. And part of my post-mortem analysis of the hour system was that they were not a true time currency for the bulk of their existence. They had set a $10 to 1 hour peg, and that is a major no-no. Do not do it. Don't do it. Don't just don't. I see you thinking about it. Don't do it. That made it a completely hamstrung its ability to serve as a functional time currency because everybody's like, oh, it's just worth $10, right? And it was a very terrible dollar-based currency because all of the units were denominated in hours, and not only in hours, but in fractions of hours, right? 2 hours, 1 hour, half an hour, quarter hour, eighth of an hour, and tenth of an hour. And they did tenth of an hour because they just wanted to have one that was worth $1. Okay. But I'm sitting there at the cafe. I'm trying to buy my coffee in the morning. I got a line of people behind me, and I'm trying to do head math of what an eighth of 10 is. And then the cashier's having to do the same thing, and he's having to go get his hours to give me change in hours. And then, they only take 50% of the transactions. So now I got to do a regular transaction on top of that. Way too much friction. Okay. So if you're going to be in a time space, be in the time space. Don't do this, hybrid time market peg shit. It was a terrible idea. And when they made that decision in the early 90s, right, $10 was the living wage, right? But when I was operating in 2015, right, that same $10 from the early 90s was now worth $17.50. So I had to do a major sort of corrective thing where I let people convert their hours into the newly introduced Ithaca dollars for $17.50 per hour. And I said, okay, hours, get back in the time space where you belong. You no longer have the dollar peg, and voila. Okay, moving on. So productive capacity backed complementary currencies are like what you find in the B2B barter and trade space. That may seem like fringe, okay, but keep in mind, this is like a $14-15 billion a year industry globally, right? And that there are hundreds of networks all around the world of, hundreds of businesses each, right? Which tap into their underutilized business capacity and turn that into a source of credit, right? Whereby they can access everybody else's goods. And you get a major advantage in doing that because you're basically able to access all of that capacity for your own cost of goods, right? I don't want to get too distracted in that, but that's a pretty substantial discount, right? Commitment pooling, again, please go read the Commitment Pool Protocol white paper published by Will Ruddock and the Grassroots Economics Foundation team around what that's like. Yes, that's the best point of reference I can give you for that. All right, loyalty-based units like frequent flyer miles, right? We're typically very familiar with this. And, there's people out there who've done analysis that say the airlines are not actually making money by selling seats on planes anymore. They've basically become financial institutions as a function of the frequent flyer miles. So that's pretty crazy when you think about it, right? Impact-based complementary currencies. This one is actually a shout out to myself. I know, just going to pat myself on the back for making a decent currency here. This is my first currency called the Merits. We issued these to people who are doing volunteering in the communities. They would, watch an educational film on water infrastructure or help out in the community garden or tutor some kids, right? And they earn merits on kind of an arbitrary basis, on the basis of like how difficult was the thing they did and how long did they do it, right? And then they could take their merits to the local businesses, and the local business would give them a special deal, a special discount that was only available through the merit. And one of the only rules in the entire system was that you cannot lose money when you accept a merit. Make sure that you cover your cost of goods, right, with cash, and then you just offer a discount, right, on your margin. So we did 2 pilots of that. If you watch the Money and Life documentary, you'll see yours truly in there, films during one of those pilots. And to this day, I believe that it is actually a very viable leading program. Like if you're in a community and you're trying to organize people and you really want to like get people to think a little bit out of the box, but not too much, and you want to find that sort of omni-win scenario, hit me up and we'll talk about the merits. Reputation-based things is like your ratings on Uber, Amazon, etc. Kind of weird to think about that as a currency, but it is a currency that speaks to, how trustworthy you are. Locality, got to shout out the Hudson Valley Currents. They are still operating now for 10 years. This was actually the sister system to Ithacash, the one that I launched in Ithaca in 2015. They have, 300 businesses. They got Tilda's Kitchen, the cafe. Really love the work that Chris Hewitt and that whole crew has been doing. Really exemplary stuff. So if you're looking for a great example of how to do a local currency, go check out the Hudson Valley Currents. And then contribution-based is like a cooperative patronage system, right? So if I'm a member of, let's say, the grocery cooperative, and I come in and I do some volunteering, right, reshelving stuff or whatever, then I can receive, worker hours that then qualify me for a heavy discount on my grocery bill, right? That kind of thing. Cooperative patronage is a legal term of art where it also, entitles you to a percentage of the profits of the cooperative. So, that's going to look different depending on which cooperative we're talking about. But in any case, I would say that is another complementary currency. So, municipal microbonds, kind of this is an emergency financial option simply on the basis that it just brings it back to home, right? I find it kind of bizarre, actually, that municipalities create municipal bonds and they sell them to Wall Street, like exclusively. I think it's totally fucked up that local communities don't have first dibs on the bonds that are being issued by their own governments to make investments in their own communities, right? That's weird to me. Maybe I'm the weird one here, but I think that's weird. So microbonds actually just bring this stuff back home and say, okay, if I'm the city of Berkeley, I'm going to shout out Berkeley here because you're probably wondering why I've got this selfie with, me and my twinsy, Boris Reznikov of Stellar over here. This is actually us providing testimony to the city of Berkeley when the vice mayor there was championing, doing a microbond project on chain. So we actually came and spoke to like, yeah, that can totally work. And yeah, there's even more cool stuff you could do with it. My part being bullet 4 here that like, hey, since you're going to be issuing microbonds in your own community anyway, like you could just provide a digital marketplace where people could circulate those things like a local currency because they're backed by government bonds, that are going to mature in 10 years. So like not only are you going to make the investment in the infrastructure you need, right? But you're also going to get a huge multiplier effect over the course of 10 years, right? So anyway, sorry, skipping ahead a little bit, right? So the city, it needs 10 million bucks to build a school, okay? So as of right now, they create these bonds, right, which are debt, right? And they have a coupon on the bond of like, 2%, 3%, whatever it is. And then that's the interest that they're going to pay on that 10 million. And so they sell all those to Wall Street, right? Who then, get the benefit of that interest, right? It's a really low risk way to store capital, whatever. And, instead of doing that, right, they say, okay, we're going to raise that money. We're going to crowdfund it out of our own community, right? So then you sell 10 million, you crowdfund $10 million out of the community, and then the community's holding those bonds, right? But what makes them micro bonds is all about like, what's your minimum purchase price, right? So if I'm selling it to Wall Street, right, I'm going to sell it off in, $100,000 chunks, right? But if you're doing a micro bond, you can sell it for $1 each, right? And you can see the example at the bottom here of Baltimore. They did a minimum investment of $25, right? So that really like lowers the barrier of entry to participating in this. And, yeah, it does presume that you've got enough cash saved up that, you know, you're ready to part ways with that for 10 years. But it's a thing people do, right? To have a safe way to save money and earn a little bit of interest, right? Well, again, you know, you could have that circulate as a community currency in the meantime, right? And then once it matures, then okay, great. Now you can come get the dollars that the government has been saving over the course of the 10 years into the redemption pool. And so then I bring my little micro bond token, cash it out for $1, right? Amazing. Bing, bang, boom. And we've just got like, you know, 100 times the benefits. I'm just saying, crazy. Okay. So wrapping this up before I get, you know, too further off track. And oh my God, I'm already on my hour. Are you for real? That's crazy. I did not even expect this to go that long. But I wanted to end this with some recommendations to specific stakeholder types. I don't want to read these things, but I can make these slides available. So specifically for community organizers and citizen groups, here's the kinds of stuff that you want to be doing to make moves towards engaging the community, bringing them together in the co-design process. You're going to want those guys that are typically making, you know, economic development related decisions and capital allocation related decisions. So go get your economic development agencies and your business associations involved. You're going to want them doing this kind of stuff. So as again, not to read the bullets. And then the local governments and the policymakers, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they could be doing to help. They just typically don't know what. So if you can bring this to them and, you know, hand it to them with a pretty little bow, and then also make it seem like it's going to be a big pain in their ass if they don't do it, right? Or you can wake them up to the reality that the shit is already hitting the fan, and that what we're talking about here is economic safety nets, and that you definitely want to be hanging these safety nets before you're falling out of the fucking sky, right? Get moving. There are policies that you can be enacting, right, to start supporting people that are doing this work, to be investing in the mechanisms and the systems themselves, right? Which same applies to the financial institutions and the foundations, right? Typically, what we want is their capital, right? And what we don't want is them having their grubby hands all over all the decision-making power, because, you know, if they were so good at that, then we probably wouldn't need this stuff in the first place. Just saying. I'm just saying. So, recommended resources for further reading. If you want to, you know, have the same kind of personality defect as I do, where you spot all this stuff and, you know, you want things to be better and stuff, then maybe read these books. Or in the case of Money and Life, that's a documentary you can find on YouTube. Highly recommended, even though it came out in 2013. Still one of the best documentaries that I've ever seen that analyzes the great financial crisis, not just in terms of economics, but more importantly, in terms of humanity's maturity and our like coming of age as a species. And, you know, the, yeah, the raising consciousness that's required, right, of us to overcome these systems level issues that we're facing. So that's it. May the force be with you. Hit me up anytime. I'm at the Token Jedi. Thank you very much. Happy to take some questions. I can't believe that lasted a full hour. I did not think that was going to take a full hour. I thought it was going to be going like 20 minutes tops. Swear to God. I was like, I don't have enough slides. They're going to want me to talk about more stuff for longer.
I actually have so many notes. This is so fun. I want to try everything you just listed. Like, maybe we could do that at GFL or at Edge City or something like that. Just try these out. Like the thing that I think about a lot with chonies is how to facilitate more bartering, where because we tend to exchange value, but we don't exchange currency and we don't exchange like invoices. It's just like mutuality, right? Like helping each other out and sharing with things. But it does leave some people giving more than others. Yeah, so I don't know, like maybe there's like governance or something to like ensure more like fair balancing of the giving and taking. Do you have experiences with that?
I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Experience with what specifically?
Just like facilitate like setting up the structure so that the giving and the taking and the sharing and the mutuality is fair and not misbalanced.
I will. I'll be the first to admit, guys. Like, first of all, one thing that I strive for and low key pride myself on is fair assessments. Okay, I just place a lot of a high premium on honesty. All right, and in my own system design. Okay, and I'm referring specifically to Ithacash here. That was not my move. All right, I really wanted to focus on coming from the merits, right? Where I could just issue merits out there and they were only live for a very specific period of time. I really put a lot of emphasis on the rewarding function, the incentivizing impactful behaviors function. And I really wanted to have a hybrid issuance strategy so that I could retain that capability even while having a one-to-one with the dollar, right? Transition currency model where the units would recirculate, right? So that was that could coexist, right? But I skipped steps in there. I'll be the first to admit it, right? And I fell into traps that definitely inform the things that I emphasize when I'm in this, kind of mentoring, coaching, incubator leading role. So the others don't skip those steps and make the same mistakes that I did. If what you're striving for is that mutuality and that fairness, which is a good thing to strive for, I would really recommend following the commitment pool protocol and, basically, because that puts the community first. It's about bringing together that community, like in person. We're all in a room together. You got a big circle of everybody that is participating, or as many people as can make it, and then you're, basically participating in a ritual of, this is what I have to offer. This is what I'm putting in, right? And then everybody sees everybody else participating and anteing up, right? And and then taking advantage of the capabilities that affords, right? And so there's a trust in that of like, okay, like I'm going to use this thing, y'all. I got some of these units, I'm trying to do some shit. Like, you're going to take this stuff and then take them. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, shit worked. Like, I got my stuff. Like, this is great, right? And then, somebody shows up with some of your promises, right? Because and I'm going to shortcut some things here. Basically, in essence, what you're doing is you're writing gift certificates to your own business, right? So, like, we're gonna pretend like I'm the Scott Morris who did photography for a living, and I'm going to write a gift certificate for $1,000 worth of photography, and I'm going to put that into the kitty, right? And then that means that somebody can go pull that gift certificate or some portion thereof and then bring it to me, and I'm on the hook. I have an actual obligation, a contractual obligation to deliver them those services, right? So that's me making good on my promise, right? And so that's the both ways of it. And so, it's through, that participation in both forms, both me benefiting and me providing the service to somebody else, that builds that community and that trust. And then you've been doing that a little while, and the kitty starts to get bigger, and so more and more things become possible. So there's some real human magic in that, and I can't, um, shout out and thank and pay homage enough to Will and all of the work that he and his team have done in Grassroots Economics Foundation. Because basically what they've done is they've taken this, traditional practice, this that served people, in the cradle of humanity, for thousands of years, and they made it available, and now that's going on chain so that it will outlive all of us. Yep, that's the one. That is the one. Great. Anybody else? Charlie, I saw you come off mute over there. You got something going on? Anybody?
I could elaborate.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm really grateful that you are sharing this commitment pool now, because I keep talking about how, like, friends and neighbors and family, we helping each other out just goes into a big pot that lasts like generations. So it's not like, oh, I gave you an hour, I gave you some carpooling, so you have to give me some, pick up my mail while I'm gone. Like it's not like so direct. It's like into a
Right.
pot. And that's what this is more, it seems like.
Yeah,
Okay, this is thank you. I'm very excited.
good. Glad to hear it. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I love the fireworks thing. I keep forgetting that it's on. I
Yeah,
got the dance
so,
party too.
oh yes.
Oh yeah.
So Scott, we have, and everyone here, we're going to have in the calendar. So if you go to the Unlock event page, you can subscribe to the calendar, join the Telegram channel, collect the NFT. There's also an Icebreaker page where you can network with people via Icebreaker. And the recording and a document with the transcription will be linked in the calendar event.
Sweet.
Thank you. Have a
My
good
pleasure,
day.
y'all. You too.